Welcome back, Chappelle. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom in our continuing discussion of this crazy Stuart monarchy era, right? We're talking about this entire time period right now where we're going through the Commonwealth period and we're going to have no king for a little while. Charles just died, like that whole thing happened. And then there was an entire English Civil War where the Roundheads were led victoriously by none other than Oliver Cromwell. Very chaotic time in English history, right? And also one of my periods of expertise. But the big thing about it, though, is we are right now on a slide that we're not supposed to start on. We're actually going to pick up right where we left off in class with E period, all right? So really, really quickly, E period, you're supposed to be doing this one. So is B and C as well, okay? E period, you're not supposed to be doing number 35. That was for classwork for B and C period because of the virtual day, okay? But the big thing about it, though, is I'm going to clip in something real quick where I explain the Commonwealth real fast, okay? So go ahead and watch that, and then I'll be back in about like 2 seconds, okay? Be right back. So really, really quick, in modern European history up to this point, he's one of the only people that's ever been executed by his own people. Now, interesting little notes on this entire thing. First and foremost, this is actually a picture from the day he was beheaded and stuff like that. That's Charles's head in the executioner's hand right there. And then also, of course, this is Charles' decapitated body and his head being picked up and shown to this entire crowd of people, especially with this little person, or like this like child being like, ew, that's gross. Now, like looking at the entire thing though, also interesting little fact, every single time now that the Parliament is opened anymore, whenever they start a session of Parliament, interestingly enough, the king or queen of England has to sit next to Charles I's death warrant, actually in an office while they're waiting for everyone to open up and stuff like that. And it's mainly just supposed to be a symbol while they sit next to it and stuff like that, being like, hey bro, don't cop an attitude with us, because if you do, you know what's going to happen? You're going to be beheaded just like that guy was, right? So it's a very interesting little moment in history because Charles I has just been executed by his legislative branch, which shows the power of the people in this moment, right? But if Charles is dead, who's going to take over? And people like right now, I know that Sydney Nuss and Megan Wolfe and Caitlin Strimlau and Alessandra Galvin and Kelsey Giannis and Audrey White are all like, hey, it's going to be his sons, one of his sons, because didn't he have a couple of kids with Henrietta and stuff like that? Doesn't the other, James and Charles get to take over now? Well, interestingly enough, no. Reason why is because when the war broke out, Henrietta ran away with the boys and went to France, into the Netherlands, into a couple of other areas as well while they were on the run, right? And so that means that we have to pick a new family, question mark? No. That means for the very first time, and only time in English history, England is without a king or queen. I know. All right, so it's absolutely bananas at this moment because England is about to be without a king or queen. They actually transformed themselves into a republic. And who is their leader? Oliver Cromwell, right? Oliver Cromwell comes into this time period and he leads England in this period of time known as the Commonwealth, right? And it's going to last from 1649 to about 1661, give or take, right, if you want to make the argument, because his son takes over for a hot second and stuff like that. Now, looking at the entire thing, though, Cromwell comes into power, and he says, I am no king, but I am the leader of your parliament, and we will be a republic with no monarch whatsoever, and we are going to have a massive whole thing go down without this king, right? And it's going to be ran by Puritans. Oh, no. So which means that so many fun things are going to go away. Now, how does he do this, though? Because it's not like every single person in the parliament was actually a Puritan or whatever. He does this in a very strategic way, okay? He actually fired everyone that did not support him from the parliament, right? He comes in as prime minister and he goes, you're fired, I don't like you. You're fired, I don't like you. You're fired, I don't like you. You don't agree with me, neither do you, neither do you, neither do you. And he fired all the members of parliament that did not agree with the puritanical ideas that he had. And so what he created now is a parliament that agrees solely with his ideas. And there's a nickname for it. The parliament he created was known as his rump parliament. Do me a favor, highlight rump parliament. That's why it's in yellow. It's why it's very important. It's going to be a fill-in-the-blank question on your test, okay? The rump parliament was the parliament designed by Oliver Cromwell so he could get all of his initiatives passed as fast as he possibly could. And do I mean some initiatives, right? The biggest things that happened underneath Oliver Cromwell are going to be a lot of crazy intense things. One, he invaded Ireland because they were Catholic and killed a lot of Catholic priests and civilians just because he wanted to bring them under the control of the British crown, and well, not the crown at this point, but under his control, and then also because he was an anti-Catholic, he's not a monarch. Oh man, I'm messing up right now. He's also just anti-Catholic, right? So he invades Ireland, leading to a massive massacre of Catholics and Irish people and Irish priests, right? Now, this is going to lead to a very intense moment. This demonstrates that Oliver Cromwell is willing to use violence against Catholic people, right? Now, interesting little thing going down, though. That means that a lot of people are going to start hiding priests in their house. There's actually a really, really interesting little thing. Like if you lived in Wales or in South England or whatever, and you were an actual Catholic, you had to be a secret about it, right? You had to be very, very secretive, or if Cromwell found out, he could kill you, right? And so literally, who's the people that are probably like target number one under Cromwell's like reign? Priests are, right? And priests have to wear a certain outfit and a habit or else it goes against their religion and stuff like that. So actually in these English homes, there were actually these things called priest holes. It was literally like a hole that you would like open up a trap door and there's a hole in the floor and there's just a priest hanging out there and he's like, hey, don't let me get killed. And so like it's a whole thing, right? And then also, another big issue that he's going to actually have is he actually has a war, another war, the Third English Civil War is what it's called, because there was like 3 of them. From 1642 to 1651, there were like several phases of the English Civil War. And then the Third English Civil War, he actually fights against Charles I's son, Charles Jr., right? Charles Jr. comes back to England and actually goes up to Scotland and says, look, make me your king, and I'll fight against Cromwell and I'll put us back on the throne. They do make Charles the king, but they also tell Charles, like, all right, get after him. But then he ends up losing, all right? So, like, the Scots wanted Charles, Charles Jr., Charles' son, the dead Charles' son, to be their king and stuff like that. He goes off and fights Oliver Cromwell, and he ends up losing. Now, in this whole crazy process as well, just to give you a little heads up, is that actually while Charles was on the run from Oliver Cromwell, he hides with a family that's loyal to the old Stuarts and stuff like that. And in that house, they put him in a priest hole, and there's a priest down there. And actually, interesting little thing happens. Charles Jr. ends up converting to Catholicism and stuff like that. Just keep it in the back of your mind that Charles Jr. is a secret Catholic, right? So going forward as well, Oliver Cromwell then also starts a massive campaign of banning all fun in England, right? He tries to cancel Christmas. He literally he canceled Halloween. He made it so you couldn't give gifts at Christmas or celebrate or feast or drink alcohol. He outlawed alcohol. He closed bars. He closed theaters. He fined people for missing mass in the streets. He banned sports on Sundays. He said that literally if boys were caught playing football on a Sunday, they could be whipped and stuff like that. There were fines issued for all kinds of stuff like that. You couldn't wear bright colored clothes. You couldn't wear perfume anymore. You couldn't wear ostentatious jewelry. He also pushed this thing known as the Navigation Acts on the colonies, which we'll talk a lot about later, but it's a series of acts that actually told the colonies like Plymouth, Jamestown, all the ones over in America, that you could only trade with Great Britain, and you could not trade with the Dutch whatsoever anymore. Now, this is going to make the colonies mad. So how is it possible that Oliver Cromwell is making English people mad and is making the colonies mad? The sad part about it is, too, is you just got rid of a monarch you didn't like. You just killed Charles I and stuff like that, and now you're being replaced with a guy that nobody likes either, right? And also a guy that smells suspiciously like a king, right? Because if you look at this whole thing, look at that. That right there is the seal of Charles I, the king that was decapitated and killed and executed by Oliver Cromwell in his parliament. This is the seal of Oliver Cromwell. Charles's seal has a horse that's running with a hunting dog underneath it, and he's hunting in the process. Charles is on a horse, there's just no dog, and it's not running. Looks to me like pretty much like he's basically a king anyway, right? Now, one big positive that Oliver Cromwell brings around is he does allow the Jews to come back to England, which is really, really cool because actually it's one of the very first times in laws that actually had happened in England where there are anti-Catholic laws on the books, but the Jewish people were allowed to come back. Now, a lot of people believe that this is because they believed that they needed to try and stimulate cultural growth, cultural businesses, and then also the economics in England as well. Because how much money are you really making if you got a bunch of people that don't drink and don't do anything, right? So so also though later on he starts freaking out, turns England into a series of military districts, almost like a police force, and he's just as bad as the kings that came before him. So ironically enough, what's going to end up happening though is Cromwell is going to die, right? So Cromwell's going to die eventually in 1660. Cromwell dies, right? He dies from a mysterious fever. They take him and they bury him. And his son takes over. His son's name is Richard Cromwell. It takes over for a small amount of time. But everybody has a nickname for him. Ask me about the nickname. Ask me about Richard Cromwell's nickname, Oliver Cromwell's son. Well, what ends up happening, though, is Oliver Cromwell dies, and, what ends up going down is they bury his body and stuff like that. And England is like, man, I think we really messed up when we brought Oliver Cromwell in. This Republic thing ain't working for us, right? It's awful. It stinks. It's the worst. You know what I mean? It's so annoying. We can't do anything. Christmas is canceled. Halloween's canceled. All this other stuff we're not allowed to do. So what should we do? So they decide to bring the Stuarts back. And we enter into a period known as the Restoration period, where they're literally restoring the Stuarts back to the throne. Exactly right. Thank you, Mr. Terry from the past. I really, really appreciate you fantastically explaining that old permit of Charles's death, the Commonwealth period. Nobody likes Oliver Cromwell in the Commonwealth period because he banned Christmas. Am I right? The big thing about it, though, is it was so bad that we're bringing the Stuarts back, right? We're bringing the Stuarts back, and this period of time is known as the Restoration Monarchy, right? Because we are restoring them back to the throne, right? And who these two guys are, before we go any further, just to give you a heads up, is Charles I's sons, right? Charles I married that girl named Henrietta Maria, who was the woman from France, right, that emasculated him all the time. It was like, are you really a man? Are you really a king? What is this really even about? So the big thing about, though, going into it, we have to understand that these are their two children, right? And it's going to be Charles and James, right? Okay? Really, really unfortunate, but if you actually look at the way that the names actually play out in the reign of the Stuart monarchs, it goes James Charles, and then Oliver Cromwell, and then it goes Charles James, right? So it's like a mirrored image of itself. So going into it, though, everything got so crusty that they decided to bring the Stuarts back, right? And we're entering into the time period known as the Restoration Monarchy. And our very first king up to the task is going to be none other than Charles II, right? Son of Charles I, who's going to come in and he is going to relinquish that control back to the people, right? Now, not control completely necessarily when it comes to the government and stuff like that, but he's going to bring back all those fun things that Oliver Cromwell got rid of, right? He's going to reopen theaters and bars. He's going to make it so you're not required to go to Mass on Sundays and receive a ticket. He's going to make it so you can swear in the streets again, right? He's going to bring back Halloween. He's going to bring back Christmas, right? He's going to actually bring back what some people call partying, right? Some people, they actually oftentimes refer to Charles II by a nickname. They call him the Merry Monarch, right? The Merry Monarch. And this group of British guys in Great Britain made this really, really awful music video of him. It's really funny, though. Check this out.
My name is Charles II.
Hail the King of Bling. Let's sing, bells ring, ding ding.
I'm the king who brought back partying. King
Exactly. I'm the king that brought back partying. Now, the big thing about it, though, is Charles II was a very loved monarch, right? He was a very beloved monarch. So much so, in fact, that they actually disliked Cromwell so bad that after Charles II comes to power, they actually dig up Cromwell's dead body and behead it and stuff like that, and then run through the streets with his head on a stick and stick it on top of a bridge, right? So going into it, though, the Merry Monarch underneath Charles II, though, is going to come back. But the thing that we need to understand about his reign is it was full of chaos a little bit, but not his fault, and he actually handled it decently well. And also controversy, right? But the big thing about it, let's start off with the controversy, because everybody loves the spicy stuff. Charles II, just so we understand the progression of time and lineage and things like that, is obsessed with two things in his life. Tennis, he loves playing royal tennis, and he also loves women. Actresses, particularly, right? Even though he's a married man, right? So Charles II, when he assumed control, was actually married to a woman from Portugal, right? A princess from Portugal. And he is actually going to cheat on her relentlessly, right? So much so that she decides to actually go back to Portugal, but since she's Catholic, she decides a little bit to be like, you know what? I'm not going to get a divorce from you because I'm Catholic. So they never got divorced, right? But he ended up having like 12 illegitimate children, but not with any of his actual queen. And because of that, he's not going to have any heirs that are going to actually inherit the throne, right? Now, another big thing that we have to understand as well is that two really crazy things are going to break out underneath his rule in the 1600s. One being the Great Plague of London and also the Great Fire of London, right? That same plague that drove Sir Isaac Newton out into the countryside where he discovered the laws of gravity is going to be the same plague that Charles had to deal with. So that's the guy who was in power when Isaac Newton was alive, right? So we also have to understand that he worked very well with Parliament, but another thing about him is he was secretly a Catholic, right? How are you a secret Catholic king? Well, the thing about it, y'all, is when he came back into power, he actually fought the Third English Civil War against Oliver Cromwell. While Cromwell was in power, the English Civil War actually went in different phases, right? In the third phase, it's Charles right here fighting against Oliver Cromwell during the Commonwealth period, right? And during this whole time period, he was actually representing Scotland, and he was a Presbyterian, and he was a Protestant, and stuff like that. But while he was on the run from Cromwell, trying to escape from him and stuff like that, he actually met a priest while he was in hiding in a thing called a priest hole. Actually, we'll explain it a little bit in class, where he actually meets him, and he falls in love with the ideas of Catholicism. Also, his cousin is Louis XIV, the Catholic King of France, right? And so we need to understand when we're looking at all these people, wow, Charles adopted Catholicism, but he kept it a secret for most of his life. He actually didn't even receive his first baptism or his first communion until the day of his death, right? Like, so yeah, but he was secretly a Catholic. So what we need to understand, though, as well is, but wait a minute, if he doesn't have any heirs to the throne, he's secretly a Catholic, he's cousins with the French king and stuff like that, what's his brother going to be like? Ooh, even worse, all right? Charles is the merry monarch that everybody enjoyed. Well, James, on the other hand, was openly a Catholic, and the people of England did not like him very much, right? And he's going to start a chain of events that's going to lead to a very dramatic moment in English history, right? So after Charles II dies in what I think is 1665, right, James II is going to rise to the throne, right? And he is openly and aggressively a Catholic, married to a Catholic woman, a very, very Catholic king. And when he rises up to the throne, he actually is going to try and exert a lot of that authority and try to actually make laws on Catholics a little bit easier in England, right? Well, the Parliament, though, is looking at him and they're like, all right, we ain't got to worry too much, right? The Parliament's like, I don't think we have to worry too much because he doesn't have any kids, right? Like, so James II and his wife were struggling relentlessly to have children, right? And like now they kept having girl, right? But every single time the girls would actually like be like married off to another prince or something. Like famously, his one daughter named Mary was actually married to the Prince of Orange in the Netherlands and stuff like that. Well, they couldn't have any boys or sons, right? And so one day though, all of a sudden, his wife gets pregnant. Turns out, it's a boy, right? And the Parliament's like, oh no! If he's got a son, that means that guy's going to inherit the throne next. And if he inherits the throne next, that means he's going to be openly Catholic. And he's going to try and do a Bloody Mary and pull us all back in that direction. So the Parliament decides that it's time to drive him out of town, right? They want to have a revolution, y'all. A revolution, a dramatic change in government, right? So the thing about it is, since he drives the Parliament so insane, thinking that Catholics will take over because he's related to the French, Parliament plots to run him out, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is driving out a king can be a very difficult task, right? Because you need his army to give up, right? And like basically surrender. And you also need to have a replacement for him. Like, okay, if he leaves, we can't put this little boy that's actually now also going to be a Catholic one day and become James III on the throne. We got to put somebody else out there, right? And so this moment in history when James is ran off is known as the Glorious Revolution. Why is it so glorious? Because no one died, all right? So like now look, not a drop of blood was shed during the Glorious Revolution. Well, what ends up going down, though, is Parliament sends a letter to his one daughter that I just mentioned, Mary Stuart, right, who would actually eventually become Mary II of England, right? And they told her, your father is driving us nuts. He is openly a Catholic. He is going against parliamentarian ideas. He is reviling against what we fought so hard for in the English Civil War. So we want you to come to England and invade with your husband. That's right. The English Parliament invited a foreigner, Mary's husband, William, the Prince of Orange, who was like the Dutch head of state at the time, okay? Not a king, but a head of state, okay? Literally because they didn't have a king in the Netherlands. They had like an old nobility guy that represented them. He was called the Prince of Orange. And so they invited William of Orange to bring his military and to be the second person since like William of Normandy to invade the island of England, right? And James heard about them coming. He was like, pah! But I have a military. No one can stop me. Go out there, military. Stop this Dutch turd from invading my island. The military goes out there. The second William gets off the boat, military puts their guns down, right? Puts their guns down and surrenders to him in a non-violent action, right? And James, freaking out, not knowing what to do, is like, crap. He's got a whole fleet of boats. I don't know what to do. As he flips out, and the English refuse to help him. And so the King of England, in the middle of the night, or not in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day, runs down to the docks, throws his royal seal into the water, and hops on a rowboat, y'all, and rows to a boat out in the middle of the English Channel, and he runs away to France. The king abdicated in a moment of fear, right? And you just had a massive shift in government and not a single soul died, right? A revolution is a forcible overthrow of a government or a social order in favor of another, right? And what has just occurred is a glorious revolution where a new power is being brought in and not a drop of blood was shed, right? And so this forcible overthrow of the government is going to lead to the rise of two new monarchs, right? Known as William and Mary, right? And William and Mary are going to rule as co-monarchs, right? William, the husband of Mary, and Mary, the daughter of James, are going to rise to power, and they're going to share ruling authority with Parliament. And some of their first initiatives are going to be to create things like the English Bill of Rights, which is considered one of the very first Enlightenment documents. And we'll talk about that a lot in the next unit, right? The Enlightenment, what it is, what's going on, and stuff like that. They encourage and usher in the ideas of freedom of speech, free elections, and a limited monarchy. Because in the long run, y'all, they decided that the English Bill of Rights, together with the Petition of Right and one other document, would come together to create a limited monarchy and a constitutional government so solid in England that no absolutist would ever be able to touch it, right? And of course, when you really look at it, all of this could have been prevented if everyone would have understood that the Magna Carta can't be stopped, right? Constitutions are important, but I'll see y'all soon. Next class, we're actually going to move into a new country, and we're going to start talking about what's going on out in France, right? But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.